And they learn something called learned helplessness. It's the same with the cry it out method to put children to sleep.
I was just going to ask about that.
Yeah, first of all, it's neurologically damaging to children under the age of 1. You should not sleep train a child under the age of 1, period. I'm going to repeat that. You should not sleep train a child under the age of 1. When they cry, they need you. When they cry, they're scared. They're in distress. If you don't respond to their distress, all you're teaching them is that the world is an unsafe place and you are an untrustworthy attachment figure for them. And they go into life believing that. And they carry that into their relationships in the future. And they literally feel lonely and alone. So it's a great way to give a child a foundation of mental illness.
So there's a viral video going around where this anti-sleep training, anti-daycare social worker claims that sleep training before the age of 1 leads to learned helplessness, neurological damage, and wait for it, the foundation of mental illness. And I just have to say, what the? That's just not wrong. It's wildly misleading. And honestly, fear like this is what actually harms parents. So let's break this down. First, a very important reminder, you do not have to sleep train. It's not a parenting requirement, and not all sleep training methods involve crying. There can be a little, but there are various methods. But the misinformation around it, that is harmful for the families who are actually interested in it. Now let's clarify what sleep training actually is, because the way it's being framed in this video is just not reality. Sleep training isn't about ignoring a baby's needs or emotionally abandoning them. It's about teaching a child how to fall asleep independently using responsive methods like graduated extinction, camping out, or parental presence to help them move through sleep cycles without intervention. It's about giving them the opportunity to learn a skill, not neglecting them, a skill I know babies are capable of. And guess what? Babies cry. That's how they communicate, but not all crying is distress. Sometimes it's just protest because they don't like the change, and we all know kids would rather party at 2 a.m. than sleep. Now let's talk about this whole crying damages the brain thing. There's exactly 0 credible scientific evidence that controlled crying leads to neurological damage. And how do we know this? Because if sleep training were causing neurological harm, we'd expect to see consistent, real-world evidence of sleep-trained children struggling with emotional and cognitive issues later in life. But guess what? We don't. In fact, a 2012 study in pediatrics followed babies who were sleep trained and found that their stress levels did not remain elevated, their sleep improved, and get this, their parents' mental health improved too. And this is important. When parental mental health improves, the entire family benefits. Another study in pediatrics found no differences in emotional security, attachment, or behavior compared to kids who weren't sleep trained. So if sleep training is so damaging, where are all the sleep trained kids with neurological impairments? They don't exist. She also throws out the term learned helplessness. And look, I'm all for using big words too, but you gotta use them correctly. Learned helplessness happens when a person repeatedly experiences a complete lack of control, responsiveness, and stops trying. That is not what's happening in sleep training. Babies aren't learning, wow, my parents abandoned me. I'm just gonna give up on life and give up on them and never ask them for anything. They're actually learning, hey, I can do this on my own. Because if sleep training caused learned helplessness, we'd expect to see sleep trained kids growing up with lower motivation, lower resilience, and poorer problem solving skills, but we don't. What do we see? Sleep, for both babies and parents. And let's not even start on this will ruin your attachment claim. Attachment is built through consistent, responsive caregiving over time, not through a few nights of structured crying. A meta-analysis examined multiple studies on sleep training and found that sleep training does not harm the parent-child attachment bond. And clinically, guess what we don't see? A single trend of sleep-trained children growing up with insecure attachments because they learn to sleep. Because attachment isn't about whether your baby cries for 5 minutes in the middle of the night. It's about how you respond every day. And let's think about this logically. If sleep training truly made babies believe their caregiver was untrustworthy, then why after sleep training do babies still smile at their parents in the morning? Why do they still reach for them, seek comfort from them, and thrive in their care? If babies truly thought that their parents had abandoned them due to sleep training, you'd see a shift in their behavior. But guess what? Every single baby who's been sleep trained still loves, still seeks, and still trusts their caregiver, even if they cried for a controlled amount of time. And then, this is my favorite part, she says sleep training lays the foundation for mental illness. Let's be serious for a second. Do you know what actually increases the risk of mental illness? Parental sleep deprivation. When parents aren't sleeping, they're more likely to experience postpartum depression, anxiety, and chronic stress. And that has real research-backed consequences for babies. In fact, a study found that maternal sleep deprivation was a significant predictor of postpartum depression, which is directly linked to worse emotional and developmental outcomes in children. So let's do the math. Babies can learn to do this. If sleep training, whether it involves crying or not, is something a family wants to try, it's perfectly fine. If parents sleep better, parents have better mental health. and babies can benefit, and they can learn this too. The bottom line, sleep training does not damage babies, does not cause learned helplessness, and does not lead to mental illness. What does cause harm? Misinformation that scares exhausted, vulnerable parents into thinking they're ruining their child for life, considering something like sleep training.